My colleague stole my $20,000 triumph, a secret recording that unleashed office chaos. It started as a quiet whisper, and no suspicion that something was terribly wrong, but I never imagined the sheer betrayal that was about to unfold. My colleague stole credit for a $20,000 deal I closed. I secretly recorded our conversation and sent it to HR. What happened next left the whole office in awe. I've been with the company for 10 years. You'd think after a decade, people would notice your dedication, your grind. You expect some recognition, some basic level of respect, but I never expected him to cross the line like he did. It all started about 6 months ago when the company announced we were expanding into the custom office furniture market. It wasn't our usual niche, more focused on those drab, cookie-cutter cubicles. But this new frontier, this world of hybrid setups and bespoke designs, well, I knew it was my chance. I had already been working on a lead for Upland Solutions, a mid-sized tech firm that was moving into a new office. They needed everything: desks, chairs, conference tables, the whole 9 yards. It wasn't the biggest deal ever, but enough to make waves. If I could close this deal, I'd finally prove what I was worth. But Mason had joined the company about 5 years ago, right out of some fancy MBA program. He was charming, sickeningly so, always knew the right thing to say to the bosses, the kind of guy who effortlessly schmoozed his way into their good graces. But over the years, I started noticing things: the way he subtly exaggerated his contributions in meetings, the way he take credit for ideas that weren't entirely his. Can you make it seem like he was a key player? But I let it slide. Petty office politics, I told myself. It wasn't until I was deep into negotiations with Upland that Mason's true colors came out. I had spent months building a relationship with Catherine, Upland's procurement manager. We were going back and forth over pricing, delivery schedules, customization options, every excruciating detail. I was on the verge of closing the deal when Mason started sniffing around, like a vulture circling its prey. "Hey Sarah," Mason said one afternoon as we both lingered in the break room, waiting for the coffee machine to sput out the last few drops of its lukewarm brew. "I heard you're pretty close to closing with Upland. How's it going?" I should have known something was up right then. He had barely shown any interest in Upland for the last couple of months, dismissing them as too small and not worth the effort. Suddenly, he was asking questions, feigning concern. "It's going well," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "We're in the final stages. I should have everything wrapped up by the end of the week." "That's great," he said, his voice a little too enthusiastic. "You know, I've got some contacts over there. Maybe I can help smooth things over if you eat any snacks." I smiled politely, trying to mask my irritation. "I appreciate the offer, Mason." "Thanks though." His eyes narrowed just a bit, but he kept smiling. That fake, plastic smile that always made my skin crawl. "No problem. Just thought I'd offer. We're all on the same team, right?" I didn't think much of it at the time. Just Mason being Mason. But in hindsight, that should have been my first red flag, the initial flare in what was about to become a 5-alarm fire. The next few days went by in a blur as I finalized the deal with Upland. Late nights, endless emails, the usual grind. By Friday afternoon, I couldn't believe it. I had done it. I closed the biggest deal in months. I was ready to enjoy a well-deserved weekend, maybe even treat myself to a nice bottle of wine. Then, just as I was walking out the door, my phone buzzed. It was Mason. "Hey Sarah," he said, his voice smooth, casual. "Just wanted to check in on Upland. How'd everything go?" "Everything's good," I said, fighting back a yawn. "I sent the final contract over to Doug a few minutes ago." There was a pause on the other end of the line, a beat of silence that now sends shivers down my spine. "Great," Mason said, his voice a little too enthusiastic, a little too rehearsed. I didn't think much of it then, just relieved to be done. But it would turn out to be the start of the worst week of my career, the week that would test my patience, my resolve, and my very sanity. On Monday morning, I expected pats on the back, maybe even a little office celebration. I closed the biggest deal in months, but as soon as I walked through the door, I could sense something was off. People were whispering, avoiding eye contact. I ignored it at first, just thinking it was the usual office gossip. But when I sat down at my desk and opened my email, my heart plummeted. There it was, staring back at me, an email from Doug congratulating Mason on securing the Upland Solutions deal. I stared at the screen, rereading the email again and again, desperately hoping it was some kind of cruel joke. There had to be a mistake. Mason had nothing to do with this deal. He hadn't done any of the heavy lifting, hadn't negotiated a single term. He had just swooped in like a thief in the night. Fueled by rage, I marched across the office to Mason's desk, my hands clenched into fists. He looked up, casually leaning back in his chair, a smug look plastered across his face. "Mason," I said, trying to keep my voice down, even though I was practically vibrating with fury. "What the hell is going on? Why is Doc saying you closed the Upland deal?" His smirk widened, that infuriatingly self-satisfied smirk that I now wanted to wipe off his face. "I don't know," he said, shrugging his shoulders. Doug must have gotten confused. You know how these things go. Confused, I practically hissed. This is a $20,000 deal, a huge win for our team, and you're just taking credit for it. Look, Sarah, he said, his voice drooping with condescension. We're a team. You did great work, sure, but we all contribute in different ways. Doug probably just figured I helped out more than I did. It's not worth making a fuss over. You'll get your recognition in due time. The audacity, the sheer arrogance of him. My hands were trembling, and it took everything in me not to scream right there in the middle of the office. I stormed away from his desk, tears welling up in my eyes. How could this have happened? Did Doug really believe Mason was responsible? Or was this some kind of political move to push Mason into the spotlight, to further his career at my expense? I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let him get away with it, but I had to be smart about it. I couldn't just storm me into Doug's office without proof. Mason had always been slippery, always had a way of twisting things to his advantage. If I was going to fight this, I needed something concrete, something undeniable. That's when the idea hit me, a desperate, risky idea that could either save my career or destroy it completely. I needed evidence, and I knew just how to get it. That night, I downloaded a voice recorder app onto my phone, my hands shaking as I navigated the app store. It felt sneaky, underhanded, even illegal. I didn't see another option. Mason was playing dirty, and I wasn't about to let him walk all over me. I needed him to slip up, to admit what he had done, and if I could get that on tape, HR would have no choice but to take my side. The next day, I made a point of stopping by Mason's desk, forcing a smile as I approached his lair. Hey, about the Upland thing, I said, leaning on the edge of his cubicle, trying to sound nonchalant. I get that Doug probably just got confused. Mason didn't even flinch. He just leaned back in his chair and stared at me with that smug look on his face. Sarah, we've been through this. It's not a big deal. Doug probably just assumed I had more involvement. You don't want to make a scene. Trust me, it'll only hurt you in the long run. I pressed the record button in my pocket, my heart pounding in my chest. So you're saying you didn't close the deal, but you're okay with taking the credit? He smirked again, his eyes gleaming with that infuriating arrogance. I'm not saying anything, but sometimes you've got to know how to play the game. Sarah, you've been around long enough. You should understand that by now. Bingo. He walked right into my trap, and I was ready to slam the door, keeping my face neutral, even though I wanted to throw my coffee in his face. I said, well, thanks for clearing that up, Mason. And I walked away, feeling the weight of my phone in my pocket like a loaded weapon. I had it. I had him. I had exactly what I needed. A clear admission, in his own words, that he had stolen my victory. The entire walk back to my desk, my hands were clammy. My breath was coming out in short, shallow gasps. I sat down, and I can feel my heart beating in my throat. There was no turning back now. The next step was the hardest. I've never been the kind of person to start drama at work. I hate it. Office politics, backstabbing. It makes me sick. But this was different. This wasn't just about me. If I didn't do something, he would just do it again, and again, and again, to me or to someone else. I couldn't let him win. I scheduled a meeting with Kim, our HR director, for the next morning. As I walked into her office, my stomach was churning with anxiety. Kim was professional, efficient, and utterly unflappable. She had a reputation for handling everything by the book. What can I do for you, Sarah? She said, her voice calm and measured. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I sat down and carefully placed my phone on her desk. I need to talk to you about something serious, I said, my voice trembling slightly. Her eyebrows raised slightly, but she didn't say anything, just waiting for me to continue. Mason took credit for the Upland Solutions deal, I said, the words hanging in the air. He had almost no involvement. I've been working on this account for months. Kim folded her hands on the desk, listening carefully. That's a pretty serious accusation, Sarah, she said. Do you have any evidence to support this claim? My fingers trembling slightly as I pulled up the recording. I said, I do. I recorded a conversation we had yesterday. I know it's not exactly conventional, but I felt like I had no choice. He's been undermining me for years, and this was the only way to prove it. Kim hesitated for a moment, then gestured for me to play the recording. Mason's voice filled the room, his words now sounding even more damning than they had the day before. By the time the recording ended, Kim was leaning back in her chair, her expression unreadable. Well, she said slowly, that's certainly compelling. I swallowed hard, waiting for her next words, knowing my entire career hung in the balance. Sarah, I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, she said. However, we need to proceed carefully. This is a delicate situation. I'm going to need to loop in Doug and possibly legal to address this properly. I nodded, feeling both relieved and anxious at the same time. I knew this wasn't going to be easy, but at least Kim was on my side. At least I had a chance. The next few days felt like an eternity. I tried to focus on my work, but every time I saw Mason in the office, still walking around, still smiling, still acting like he owned the place, it took everything in me not to confront him right then and there. Then finally, the email came. I was called into a meeting with Kim, Doug, and Mason. My heart raced as I walked into the conference room. The tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. Mason was already seated, his usual cocky smirk in place, clearly unaware of what was about to go down. Doug, on the other hand, looked grim. He nodded at me as I took my seat but didn't say anything right away. Kim was the one who opened the meeting, her voice calm and professional. We're here today to discuss some serious issues surrounding Upland Solutions deal, she said. Sarah has raised concerns that there's been a misrepresentation of who was responsible for closing the account. After reviewing the evidence, we need to have an open conversation about what happened. Mason's smirk faltered slightly, his eyes flicking to me and then back to Doug. I don't understand, he said, feigning innocence. I worked on that deal with Sarah. I thought it was a team effort. Doug leaned forward, his expression unreadable. Mason, we've reviewed the evidence. It's clear that Sarah did the vast majority of the work. Mason's face turned pale, his eyes widening in panic. A recording, he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. He shot me a look that could have killed, a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. You recorded our conversation. I met his gaze, my heart pounding in my chest, but my resolve unwavering. I had to, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. You weren't giving me any choice, Mason. You were stealing my work and acting like it was no big deal. Doug leaned forward, his expression hard. Mason, we need to hear your side of this. Did you or did you not take credit for closing the deal without fully contributing to it? For the first time, Mason seemed truly rattled. He shifted in his seat, his hands fidgeting in his lap. I mean, look, he stammered. Sarah did great work, sure, but I was involved. Doug, you know how it is. We all contribute in different ways. Doug's face hardened. That's not how this works. Mason, he said, his voice like ice. You know better than that. This company runs on integrity, and if you can't respect that, then we have a serious problem. Mason opened his mouth to argue, but closed it again, realizing he was trapped. He had been caught, and there was no denying it anymore. Kim didn't waste any time. Mason, effective immediately, you're being placed on administrative leave while we complete a formal investigation, she said, her voice firm and unwavering. Depending on the outcome, further actions, including termination, may be taken. Mason's face went white, his entire body seeming to deflate. You can't be serious, he said, his voice cracking just slightly. This is ridiculous. Over one deal, he turned to me, desperation etched on his face. Sarah, come on, he pleaded, but I didn't respond. I had nothing more to say to him. Doug stood up, signaling that the meeting was over. Mason, you'll be escorted out by security, he said. Sarah, thank you for bringing this to our attention. We'll make sure everything is handled properly. Mason looked at me one last time, but this time there was no arrogance in his eyes. No more threats, just a defeated, almost pleading look. As I left the room, I felt a mix of emotions, relief, vindication, and a deep sense of exhaustion. The fight had been long, exhausting, and at times terrifying. And in the end, I'd come out stronger, with my integrity intact and my career secure. The next few days, Mason was officially terminated. Word spread fast around the office, and everyone was buzzing about it. Some people were shocked, others weren't surprised at all. People would congratulate me or ask for the juicy details, but I wasn't interested in the office gossip. I just wanted to move on. Doug called me into his office the day after Mason termination. Sarah, I wanted to apologize, he said. I should have seen what was happening. You've always been one of our top performers, and I should have recognized that this was your win from the start. Thank you, Doug, I said, appreciating his sincerity. I just want to make sure something like this doesn't happen again. Not to me, not to anyone. He smiled, a genuine smile this time. I understand, he said. And on that note, we're moving forward with your promotion to the Director of Business Development. You've more than earned it. Director, it was a much bigger promotion than I had expected, but I managed to keep my composure. Thank you, I said, my voice filled with gratitude. I won't let you down. As I left Doug's office, a wave of relief washed over me. The fight had been long, exhausting, and at times terrifying. And in the end, I'd come out stronger, with my integrity intact and my career secure. The next few months were a whirlwind. I stepped into my new role with confidence, determined to make a difference, not just in sales, but in how we operate as a team. I implemented leadership training and mentorship programs, trying to instill empathy into the new team. I didn't want another Mason situation to ever happen again, and I made sure everyone understood that we were going to do things differently from now on. One of the first changes I made was creating a more transparent system for crediting deals. We introduced a collaborative software where every step of a deal, from lead generation to close, was meticulously tracked, and everyone could see who contributed what. There was no more hiding behind vague notions of team effort to cover up someone swooping in at the last minute to claim someone else's work. People responded well to the changes, especially the newer employees who felt that this was now a level playing field where hard work was rewarded not stolen. Some of the more senior members of the team were a little resistant at first, mostly because they were used to the old ways of doing things. But as they saw the positive impact on morale and productivity, they eventually got on board. The newer employees thrived, not having to worry about navigating office politics just to get their work recognized. They could focus on what they were hired to do, sell. But it wasn't just the practical changes that made a difference. It was the shift in culture. The office started to feel more like a team, less like a battlefield. There were fewer harsh conversations in the hallways, fewer backstabbing emails. For the first time in years, I felt like people actually liked each other. Our industry isn't as big as people think, and once word got out about what had happened, Mason became almost untouchable. I heard through the grapevine that he tried to get interviews at a couple of our competitors, but no one wanted to take the risk of hiring someone who'd been publicly ousted for stealing credit. And that, more than anything, brought me a sense of satisfaction. One day, a few months after Mason's departure, I got a notification on my phone, a LinkedIn request from Mason. I stared at it for a while, a million different thoughts swirling through my head. Part of me was curious. What could he possibly want now? Was he going to try to apologize? Was he going to beg for some kind of professional favor? But then I thought back to all the sleepless nights, the anxiety, the betrayal, and with a sense of calm resolve, I hit the ignore button. I didn't need an apology from Mason to move on. I had already done that by standing up for myself, by taking back control of my career and my life. I wasn't about to let him, or anyone like him, drag me back into the past. Life at work moved forward, not only for me, but for the other salespeople on the team. With the new systems in place, our expansion into the custom office furniture market took off, opening the door for new positions on our team. It was the start of a whole new line of business that brought in millions, and I helped lead that initiative. As my role expanded, I began looking for new talent and found a young woman with immense sales skills. Her name was Rachel, and like most, I knew office politics loomed around her at the new company. It was strange at first, realizing that I was now one of the senior members of the team. I had been the one climbing my way up for so long that it took some adjusting to get used to people coming to me for advice. But I found that I liked it. Corporate sales, mentoring new talent, giving them the tools to succeed without having to play the games that I've been forced to play. Rachel reminded me a little of myself when I first started, ambitious, hardworking, but unsure of how to navigate the treacherous waters of office politics. She was incredibly talented, a natural salesperson, but she lacked the confidence to stand up for herself, to challenge the status quo. Rachel, I said one afternoon after she had come to me in tears because one of her senior co-workers had taken over a project she had started, a project that she had poured her heart and soul into. You're more capable than you realize. You know how to handle these situations. You just need to trust yourself. But what if I mess it up? She said, her voice trembling with insecurity. What if they think I am just being difficult? I smiled, remembering how I had once felt the same way. So what if they do? I said, at least you stood up for yourself. And if you don't fight for what's rightfully yours, who will? A few days later, I watched with pride as Rachel stood her ground in a meeting, pushing back when someone tried to take credit for her ideas. She was articulate, confident, and unwavering. I watched her grow more confident, more assertive. As the months rolled on, I found a sense of fulfillment I had not experienced before. I had helped create an environment where people felt valued, respected, and empowered. And then one day, out of the blue, I got an email from Catherine, the procurement manager at Upland Solutions, the same Catherine I had first worked with to close the original $20,000 deal. She was reaching out to let me know they were expanding again and wanted to discuss a much larger project, a project that would require a complete overhaul of their existing office space. This one was valued at over $500,000. We really appreciated how you handled the last deal, Catherine wrote. You were professional, responsive, and always went the extra mile. We'd love to work with you again if you're interested. I could barely contain my excitement. This was it, the culmination of all the hard work, the struggle, the drama. I had taken one small deal and turned it into something that could change the company further. I called a meeting with Doug and the rest of the sales team, outlining the new opportunity. Everyone was excited, eager to prove themselves, to land a bigger deal. But this time, there would be no misunderstandings, no hidden agendas, no stolen victories. Everything was out in the open, transparent and collaborative. It was exactly how I had envisioned things when I first stepped into the director role. When the deal was finally signed, sealed, and delivered, Doug came into my office, a rare look of admiration in his eyes. You've come a long way, Sarah, he said. I knew you were capable, but I didn't realize just how much this department needed someone like you until I saw the results. Thanks, Doug, I said, feeling a swell of pride. I couldn't have done it without your support. He chuckled. Don't give me too much credit, he said. You've earned every bit of this. As I walked back to my desk, a fight with Mason seemed like a distant memory now, a closed chapter in my life. I had grown, not just as a salesperson, but as a leader, as a person. I had learned how to stand up for myself, how to fight for what was right, how to create a workplace where everyone had a chance to succeed. It was a rewarding feeling to see the respect I had earned not just for my colleagues, but to see the new crop of salespeople start out on a level playing field without all the backstabbing. I was proud of how things were going and of the direction the company was heading in. Looking back, I wonder, did I handle the situation with Mason correctly? Was secretly recording in the right move? Or was there a better way to address the issue? Knowing everything that happened, what would you have done differently? I would really appreciate any of your insights, because you hearing a story like this might spark an idea from your past experiences that would benefit someone else in the future too.